Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. For the second year, artist Donald Jackie Hinkson is revealing his art to residents of Fisher Avenue, St. Anne's and beyond. Schools and small groups are encouraged to message him to set up a viewing from February 20 to March 4. It is time to go in-depth on the art of Dr. Jackie Hinkson with this Chaconia Medal Gold recipient. Welcome, Jackie. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you so much for making the time. Year two, what is the inspiration for the exhibition, and has that inspiration changed leading up to the second iteration?
Well, that's a big question. The inspiration for the exhibition dates back many years when I felt the need to express what I was seeing happening in the society, but in a bigger way, on a grander scale. And that is when I got the idea to work mural size. In responding to daily events in the country, I got the idea to almost like a journalist, alluding to daily events as they happen, injecting in that depiction my personal feelings. And that is how I managed to produce one or two murals last year, or for years now, and put them on show. The idea of putting them on show publicly, of course, is to reach as wide a public as possible, the man in the street, so to speak. So why not? And I took the chance and mounted this exhibition in my street. This year, the response was so good. I think the response had to do with the fact that there was no carnival last year, and people were happy to see something that excited them that was carnival related. So I just continued where I left off last year and extended one mural by 120 feet or so. And that is what I'm putting up this year.
Looking at the process of articulating, responding to daily events in society, what is that process like, and what are some of the differences between doing a bigger piece, a piece that is larger than life, and a smaller piece? What are some of those differences and distinctions?
Well, one immediate difference I can think of is that a smaller piece inevitably has to be shown in a gallery or in a museum type space, which means that the man in the street, the average person, is not likely to go and see that. Working like this and putting it out publicly means that I'm reaching a far wider viewership. That is basically, the main difference. The second one, I guess, is that working at this scale allows me to depict the human form almost, and sometimes life size, so that the viewer can almost physically enter the mural, enter the space of the artwork. Those are a couple of the main differences.
And with those main differences in mind, and allowing one access to more of the layperson, I think, as you describe it, and two, with the size allowing individuals to enter that art, how do you explain mass as metaphor?
Well, because what I was trying to say, what I was trying to express about my responses to what I was observing going on in the country, in the society, and in the wider world, I wanted to go beyond just a literal depiction of something. So in these murals, for example, if I were to depict a robber, it wouldn't be a literal depiction of a robber. There would be something like on the robber's hat or what is represented on his cape that would allude to daily events in our society and internationally. For example, right behind me now, I can think of a very common sight in the country, particularly at Carnival time, are these fete signs that advertise what band, what fete, what group performing, what days, and so on. So I'm utilizing an everyday iconic, ordinary image, like a fete sign, but by manipulating the words on them, I now begin to allude to other things. I belong to make perhaps pointed statements about other things. So who is on stage? Nikki M. Who is Nikki M? Well, I think we all know who Nikki M is. And who is Roaring G? GG? Well, although more commonly known now as Triple G, I think. That is pretty obvious. So this is a way in which I am able to tie in the ordinary, everyday imagery with a statement of social or political observation.
And how easy is it to want to take that wider conversation and distill it into these words that have so much meaning, be it Nikki M or Nikki M cousin or Triple G, but saying, okay, well, this is what I'm going to use to represent this entire conversation. How is that like for you?
Well, it's a very difficult job. The biggest danger in all of this is that I have to be wary of not getting carried away with being excited about daily events. Because as we all know, what is discussed in the society today with passion and anger, by tomorrow or next week, vanishes. So I don't want to reduce my work to something resembling a passionate letter to the editor or some kind of egregious statement made by a caller on a radio talk show and so on. So what I'm trying to do is, while alluding to these ordinary, everyday, ephemeral events, I'm trying to integrate that with the formal elements that go into a work of art. You know, the use of color, the use of tone, the use of contrast, the use of juxtaposition, shape relationships, and so on. In fact, it is far more important for me to successfully manipulate those formal visual elements than it is for me to get people excited about. Look so and so, look what this one said, look what that politician said. It is far more important and much more difficult is to get those two components to interrelate. That is the difficulty.
And looking at those difficulties and the work of integration, we take a look at some more of your art on this side of the conversation. When we return, we continue the conversation with artist Jackie Hinkson. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are going in depth on the sweetness that is the work of Jackie Hinkson. And just before we took the break, Mr. Hinkson, you were talking about not becoming a slave to the hype and making sure that your work is something that you think can have legs and stand the test of time and possibly appeal to wider audiences than just an angry letter to the editor. But with that in mind, though, do you consider yourself as making art, or does art make you?
Sure, I understand the question. But making art, yes, I am. I'm not sure about the part about art making me. Perhaps to elaborate a bit on that, trying to turn the art into something more universal and permanent. I can make a comparison that all of us are familiar with a lot of calypsos that refer to daily issues in the world of politics and so on. But after a year, or when the figures, the people in that drama depicted in that particular calypso are no longer there, and things are forgotten. But there are other calypsos, and the one that I can think of right now is one sung by Kitchener about life in London when he was far from home. And he talks about, Mama, Mama, would you like to meet your sonny, and so on. And how that calypso painted a bigger picture. It spoke of a bigger emotion that could be interpreted universally, because there are peoples all over the world and groups and in movements of people and demographics and so on that know and feel that kind of experience. So that calypso has a much greater permanence and universality than, let's say, that one that just talks about who cuss who in Parliament and what this one say and who vex and who that and so on. I just throw that out as an example. I mean, I live now, but if I am, when I look at the cave art that was done 24,000, 30,000 years ago, depicting animals in the walls of caves in France and Spain and so on. And I see the humanity that those people depicted those animals with, then, that speaks of a bigger human experience. I don't know if that helps explain what I'm trying to talk about in universality.
It does, and thank you for that. But the second half of the question, if you weren't expressing yourself in this way, what do you think that you would be doing? And I say that because it seems as though this is something that you do, this is the person that you are. Some people may seek validation outside for them to say, okay, well, you have this certificate, you are an artist, versus just expressing yourself, making this art, doing this all the time. If you're expressing yourself somewhere else or in another manner, what do you think that might be?
In another medium completely. I think, is that what you're asking?
Medium, even correct.
Well, I've always been fond of foreign languages, but that doesn't mean I'll be able to express myself with equally poetically as I hope I do in the art. Or I might say that I was fond of writing. So, maybe a novelist or something like that, or poet maybe, and so on. But I don't think dwell too much on those kinds of questions. But yeah.
Well, let us not dwell on them too much either. So in terms of individuals contacting you to have the groups to take part, to be a part of this exhibition, which starts on the 20th, how do people do that?
Well, I mean, I can be contacted at my telephone number, which is 390-9961, or on Facebook, I suppose, if you pull up my name. I'm not so high-tech savvy, but certainly the cell phone number would work. I should mention that last year, without me knowing, people arrived on the scene in costumes to get, if you could pardon the expression, a taste of Carnival. As you can see in the images here. And I suspect that some people will do this. Yeah, I remember being stunned last year on Juve morning, early o'clock, like 6, when I went out into the street to see one lady dressed in a costume with a little radio in her hand, prancing up and down the street between the murals. It was very moving, very moving.
And that makes me want to ask about that response, because you spoke about it at the beginning of the conversation. You just spoke about it. And was the response from the general public who would have availed themselves of the opportunity a little different from your neighbors? What did your neighbors have to say about this?
The neighbors were very excited. I mean, when I approached them, well, I have a good relationship with my neighbors. They were all excited and promised their support and helped. And they were glad to see it up. And they kept asking, when are you going to do it again? Well, I hope they're not going to ask me that again this year, because I think this is the last time. Oh, Lord, who's to say what the situation will be a year from now in Carnival 23 or whatever year it is, you know.
Definitely.
But this is my contribution at more than one level, in a way to Carnival, in a way to art, and in a way to communicating my feelings about the world and the country.
And sometimes when we hear the word contribution, different people will define it different ways. There's some things you say you don't necessarily dwell on as much. I want to know, how do you define success, and what kind of needs to happen with this project? You say this may be the last one, for you to say, yes, it was worth it. This has been a success.
Well, several things determines whether I think the art is successful and whether the event or the exhibition is successful. I am a very harsh critic of my work. So it boils down to that in the end. If I'm not satisfied with the work, well, then nothing can please me. If there's good public response, then it means I have somehow successfully communicated my feelings to others and perhaps revealed certain realities to them that they were not fully aware of. That too would be qualified as success. Then there's financial success, which in the long term is low down on the ladder, because even if you're financially successful in the sale of your art, it doesn't mean that you are satisfied with the strength of your expression and of your vision. What other kind of success is there? There's media success, which sometimes can be manipulated or be political, and so on. So there are those levels of judging success. But I know that the biggest one is that I have to be satisfied that I have done well, which I rarely feel.
And on that point, in terms of like the minute and a half we have left as a benediction of sorts, speak to the person at the bottom of the mountain at the start of their journey in art from your perspective, in terms of at least 6 decades. You have UNESCO saying that your sketch pads are valuable. Talk to that person who's now starting off. What are some of the things that you'd like to tell them?
Well, these are aspiring artists, of course. This is a question that I've been asked 1,000 times over the decades. And at first I used to give complex answers or multiple answers and so on. But in the end, I boiled it down to be prepared to work every day of your life till the very end. And to be I think that basically is it. Be prepared to work
All right,
at
and
it.
we want to thank you so much for that. It feels like the saying, fazer trabalho, do the work. And we want to thank you for continuing to do the work, Jackie Hinkson. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, we want to thank you for joining us for this conversation. This has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you for joining us.